The rain hadn't even started yet, but Bella Swan already felt drenched in nerves, in homesickness, in the cold breath of a town she'd once begged to escape. Forks, Washington, a place shrouded in clouds and secrets. Her journey began under the vast, burning skies of Phoenix, her last inhale of dry, desert air tinted with sun and goodbye. Her mother stood beside her, worry in her eyes but a brave smile on her lips. Bella tried to mirror it. She lied gently, "I want to go." But of course, she didn't. Not really. Forks wasn't home. It was exile. A cloudy corner of the Pacific Northwest, where the trees breathed mist and everything always felt slightly damp. Her father, Charlie, chief swan to the locals, waited with quiet anticipation. He offered her a rusty old pickup truck as a welcome gift, awkwardly proud. Bella raised an eyebrow at its age, but tucked away a smile. It was something. He was trying. Their car ride was filled with clipped comments and careful silences. Father and daughter, two alike in their quiet. The weather, appropriately, was gray. And yet, within this gloom, a new chapter was stirring. Something was coming. Something that would make Bella's distaste for forks seem like the smallest shadow on the edge of a far larger storm. The landscape streamed past Bella's window in a dreamlike haze of mossy branches and endless green. Ferns blanketed the forest floor like a lush carpet, and drizzled light filtered through thick foliage. It felt otherworldly. Beautiful, yes, but overwhelming. Forks was no longer just a place. It was a new reality. Charlie's modest two-bedroom house hadn't changed at all. Everything looked exactly as she remembered from summers past. Small, quiet, stuck in time. But parked out front, like a strange red gift from another era, sat her new truck. Sturdy, rounded, red as rusted cherries, it was impossibly charming. She hadn't expected to love it, but she did. Even if it was an iron behemoth that looked like it could destroy smaller vehicles on impact. Inside, her bedroom waited like a time capsule. The pale blue walls, the peaked ceiling, the lace curtains, familiar to the point of ache. Charlie had kept it just as she'd left it, down to the rocking chair and the modest desk, now rigged with a clunky computer. It wasn't much, but in the soft glow of drizzle-dimmed light, it felt like her own. Charlie, bless him, gave her space, a gift in its own way. Unlike her mother, who fluttered in every quiet moment, Charlie let her sit in silence, let her cry quietly behind the curtains. Forks High loomed ahead like a storm cloud, and she needed the solitude to gather herself. Bella's thoughts spiraled that evening. About school, about fitting in, about not fitting in. She was the new girl from the sun, too pale for the desert and too alone for a town like Forks. Everyone there had known each other since childhood. She would be the strange, out-of-place girl. Again. Later, wrapped beneath the faded old quilt from her childhood, she drifted uneasily into sleep. Rain clattered endlessly outside, and the fog thickened into a morning cloak. This place was a cage of damp air and heavy sky. Breakfast was quiet. Charlie, in his usual stoic way, offered her a wish for good luck. She accepted it with a small nod, even if she didn't believe it herself. Luck rarely found its way to her. Alone again, Bella wandered the unchanged kitchen, haunted by family photos and yellow cabinets her mother had once painted in a failed bid to bring sunshine indoors. Her father's love for her mother still clung to the walls like another kind of fog, unspoken but heavy. Forks had always been gray, but now it was real. and Bella was about to face its full weight. The morning air was thick with moisture, the kind that crept into sleeves and soaked the edges of your thoughts. Bella zipped her jacket like a defense mechanism, tugging the hood over her hair as if she could stay hidden just a bit longer. She couldn't loiter, not in that creaky old house where the silence echoed too loudly. Her boots squished on the wet ground, foreign and too functional. The scent inside her truck, a strange cocktail of peppermint, old leather, and engine oil, was oddly comforting. The engine roared to life with the enthusiasm of a dragon waking from hibernation. Loud, yes, but it ran, and that was something. Forks High School wasn't a looming brick monolith like she expected. Instead, it resembled a collection of sleepy cottages huddled beneath towering trees. Maroon brick, overgrown hedges, like it had sprung up in the middle of the woods and never expected visitors. Inside the front office, Bella was greeted by an eager redhead and the unsettling realization that she was already a topic of gossip. Her name seemed to open invisible doors, or at least files hastily pulled from towering stacks. A map, a schedule, a smile. "You'll like it here," they all said, hopeful, doomed to disappointment. Back outside, the parking lot began to fill with cars as tired-looking students trudged toward class. Bella noted with relief the lack of luxury vehicles, just rusted bumpers, mismatched hubcaps, and the gleam of a single, too-perfect Volvo that didn't belong here. It made her truck seem almost inconspicuous. Clutching the map like a lifeline, she navigated toward her first class. As she neared the door marked with a large painted 3, her breath came shallow. She didn't want to stand out. She didn't want to be noticed. Yet, in a place like this, the new girl might as well have been wrapped in neon. The classroom was small, damp with the scent of wet coats and pencil shavings. Mr. Mason, the literature teacher, looked surprised, maybe even startled, to see her name. He sent her to an empty seat at the back without ceremony, for which she was quietly grateful. That didn't stop the sideways glances or whispered exchanges from classmates trying not to be caught staring. She kept her head down, eyes scanning a familiar reading list. Bronte, Shakespeare, Chaucer. Like old friends. Comforting and safe. Her mind wandered to essays she'd already written on these topics. Maybe her mom could send them. Maybe that wasn't cheating. Maybe it was survival. When the bell rang, it startled her. The buzz sounded more like a fire drill than a class change. She was gathering her things when a wiry boy with a friendly, slightly over-eager smile leaned across the aisle. "You're Isabella Swan, right?" Bella forced a small smile. "Bella," she corrected gently. He seemed unfazed, happy to help. His name was Eric, clearly the type who volunteered for yearbook committee and memorized school maps. He offered to walk her to her next class, more excited than was entirely necessary. Still, Bella accepted. The company kept her from slipping too far into her own head. They walked through the drizzle. People around them whispered, just out of earshot. Bella felt the familiar swell of anxiety. She joked, dry and deadpan, but it seemed Forks didn't trade in sarcasm the way Phoenix did. When they reached her next classroom, Eric offered a hopeful farewell, suggesting they might share more classes. Bella responded with a faint smile before slipping inside, steeling herself for the next round of introductions, glances, and inevitable discomfort. The rest of Bella's morning blurred into a series of awkward glances, tentative greetings, and the kind of small talk that feels more like work than conversation. Trigonometry was a low point. Mr. Varner made her introduce herself in front of the whole class. Her boots betrayed her, her cheeks flared, and gravity had no mercy. She stumbled into her seat, wishing she could disappear into the floor tiles. Still, names began to stick to faces. Some students were kind, curious in the friendly sense. Others just watched her like she was the midday special on cable. At lunch, she was adopted by a whirlwind of a girl whose name escaped her completely. Tiny in stature but big in presence, the girl steered her into the cafeteria and seated her at a table full of polite, eager strangers. And it was there, between bites of forgettable cafeteria food and equally forgettable small talk, that Bella first saw them. Across the room, isolated at the farthest table, sat 5 students. Or rather, 5 beings that looked like they belonged on the pages of mythology or an Armani ad campaign, not in a high school lunchroom. They didn't eat. They didn't speak. They didn't interact with anyone outside their circle. But what truly made them impossible to ignore was not just their beauty. It was their stillness, their distance, the impossibility of them. Each was starkly unique. One, tall and massively built. Another, graceful and golden-haired. One lean and bronze-haired, boyish but distant. The girls were opposites. A curvaceous blonde, whose presence seemed to dim everyone else's light, and a diminutive elfin girl, whose black hair spiked in every direction. And yet, for all their visual differences, they shared a ghostly pallor, impossibly pale, even for forks. Their dark eyes and shadowed features made them look sleepless, yet unshakably perfect. Bella couldn't look away. She didn't have to worry. They weren't watching her. They were above it all. That changed in an instant. When Bella asked her lunchmate, Jessica, she finally recalled, about the group, it was the bronze-haired boy who looked up. Edward. For one heartbeat, their eyes met. And then he looked away, too quickly, as if caught in something he didn't want to engage. Jessica filled in the rest with gossip-laced facts. They were the Cullens and the Hales, foster siblings technically. They lived together under the guardianship of Dr. Cullen and his wife, young, generous, and somewhat alien themselves. No one quite knew what to make of the situation. The town's opinions fell somewhere between admiration and thinly veiled jealousy. Bella tried to keep her questions neutral, but her eyes betrayed her curiosity. Edward fascinated her most. Beautiful, yes, but also unreadable, his expressions shifting like shadows under cloudlight. And for just a second, she thought, was he smiling? They left together, moving as though they weren't fully bound by gravity, unnaturally elegant, strange, wrong somehow. Bella remained at the table longer than she normally would have. She wanted to seem like she belonged, like she was just another student, not someone shaken by the sight of a boy who never looked back. Well, almost never. The moment Bella stepped into the biology classroom, she knew something was off. Angela quickly joined her lab partner, leaving Bella the only option, the seat next to him. Edward Cullen, the strange boy with the bronze hair and haunted eyes. She recognized him instantly, but what she wasn't prepared for was his reaction. As she passed, he seemed to stiffen, like a statue suddenly struck by lightning. His dark gaze, sharp, black, cold, met hers for an instant that felt stretched by static. His expression, pure loathing. It rocked her. She turned away, cheeks flushing, nearly tripping over a book left in the aisle. Laughter followed her as she fumbled toward the teacher's desk. Mr. Banner, thankfully no fan of grand introductions, signed her attendance slip and pointed wordlessly toward the only available seat, next to Edward. She slid into the chair without looking at him. But from the corner of her eye, she saw he was leaning away from her, clinging to the edge of his seat like her presence burned him. His jaw was clenched, a pale fist tight on his thigh, tendons stretched taut beneath skin that looked more marble than flesh. Was it something about her? Her shampoo? Her presence? She tugged her hair forward as a barrier and tried to focus on the lecture. Cellular anatomy. Material she already knew. But despite her efforts, her thoughts kept circling back to the boy beside her, who sat so still. He barely seemed to breathe. He was holding himself like a caged animal. And every time she risked a glance, she was met with a fierce, unreadable glare that seemed to strip her nerves bare. When the bell finally rang, Edward moved like water, sudden, fluid, and fast, on his feet and out the door before anyone else had even stood. Bella sat frozen, angry, confused, and maybe, she admitted to herself, a little hurt. Outside the classroom, she met Mike, a cheerful, chatty boy with spiky blonde hair and an easy smile. He walked her to Jim, made her laugh a little, and confirmed what she was afraid to ask. Yes, everyone had seen it. Edward's hostility hadn't gone unnoticed. He looked like he was in pain, Mike said. Bella brushed it off as best she could, but the thought clung to her like the damp fork's air. What had she done? Why would he react that way? Jim was uneventful, thankfully. No games today. No fresh bruises or broken pride. But the simmering frustration inside her didn't budge. After school, she took a quiet walk to the front office to turn in her attendance slip. The wind was colder now, brushing against her like an unwelcome thought. And there he was, again. Edward Cullen stood at the front desk, unaware of her presence. His voice was low, smooth, and tense. He was asking to switch classes, specifically biology, anytime, any hour. He just needed to not be there. Bella stood against the wall, stunned, not just by the request, but by the confirmation of her worst suspicion. It was about her. And yet, it didn't make sense. He didn't know her. He hadn't even spoken to her. How could someone hate a stranger? Something wasn't adding up. The school office door creaked open, ushering in a gust of icy wind that snatched at Bella's hair and scattered papers across the receptionist's desk. A girl slipped in, silent, purposeful, leaving a note in a basket and retreating without a word. But something shifted. Edward Cullen's back stiffened. He turned, slowly, and locked eyes with Bella. For one dreadful heartbeat, the air crackled. His face, as flawless as a sculpture, radiated hatred, unfiltered and bone deep. Bella froze. Every instinct screamed danger as his stare bore into her. It passed in a second, but the chill lingered long after he turned away. "Never mind then," Edward murmured smoothly, his voice like crushed velvet, soaked in contempt. "I can see it's impossible. Thank you so much for your help." And just like that, he was gone. Bella approached the desk, her cheeks colorless for once. "Fine," she said when asked about her day. It felt like the only word she could manage. Outside, her old truck waited, rust and steel wrapped in quiet welcome. She slipped inside and sat still, the storm in her mind louder than the engine when it finally roared to life. She drove home, fighting off tears she wasn't ready to shed. The next day brought no relief, just contrast. Some things were easier. It wasn't raining, for one. People looked at her a little less. Mike was there, cheerfully clinging to her side like an excitable dog, even as Eric glared across classrooms with jealous eyes. Bella was treading water instead of drowning. But it was also worse. She was exhausted. Her classes dragged. She got called on in math unprepared. She beamed a teammate in the head with a rogue volleyball. And most disconcertingly, Edward Cullen was nowhere to be found. Her stomach knotted through lunch, waiting for him, wanting to prove her fears wrong. But as the clock ticked forward and he never appeared, a cold seed of certainty settled in her chest. He was avoiding her. In biology, Mike bounced beside her like a faithful escort. Edward's seat stayed empty. Her relief clashed with the irritating tug of ego and self-doubt. Was she really that unbearable? The question taunted her. After the final bell, she ducked out fast, successfully dodging Mike for now. She needed normalcy, something concrete. She had taken over dinner duties at Charlie's request, and her own survival instincts. So her first stop was the thriftway. The moment she started the truck, it howled to life like a dying beast. Heads turned. Among them, the Cullens and the Hales, gliding into their gleaming silver Volvo. Their eyes flicked toward the noise, impassive, unreadable. Of course, they looked impeccable. Designer clothes, impossible faces. They could have worn garbage bags and still turned heads. They were beautiful and unreachable. At the grocery store, Bella welcomed the fluorescent calm, the rhythmic routine of picking produce and balancing steak on cartons of eggs. It was familiar, grounding. Back home, she wrapped potatoes in foil, slipped the steak into marinade, and settled into sweatpants in solitude. When she checked her email, it was a flurry of worried messages from her mom. Playful, dramatic, frantic. She smiled, typing back a message full of reassurances and sarcasm-laced affection. Just as she was cracking open Wuthering Heights again, the front door clicked open. "Bella!" Charlie called out. "Who else?" she muttered. He walked in, boots heavy, gun holstered out of habit. They exchanged a few words. Dinner was simple. Steak, potatoes, a salad, and with Charlie tucked away, watching TV and Bella setting the table, some sense of balance settled over her again. For a moment, dinner with Charlie was calm. They shared the same quiet rhythm. No need to fill the space with chatter. He complimented the food, took seconds, and asked gently about school. Bella gave him the basics: Jessica, lunch tables, and Mike Newton. Very friendly. She tried to gloss over the oddities, but curiosity tugged too hard. "Do you know the Cullen family?" Charlie's reaction surprised her. He got defensive, not about the kids, but about what people said. Dr. Cullen, it turned out, was a man Charlie deeply respected. A gifted surgeon who could have worked anywhere but chose Forks. As for the Cullen kids, polite, mature, not like the town gossips made them out to be. "They stick together like a family should," Charlie said. His speech, longer than anything Bella had heard from him, stuck with her even after the dishes were done and the TV hummed to life in the other room. That night, she fell asleep quickly, finally slipping into something like routine. The days that followed unfolded with a steady beat. Bella grew used to the shuffle of classes, the wary waves of students learning her name. Gym remained a hazard, but her classmates learned to steer clear and cover for her. The one presence that didn't return was Edward Cullen. Each day, Bella watched the cafeteria door, the corners of the biology lab, the gravel paths of the parking lot. Nothing. His absence left a small hollow, equal parts relief and unrest. She told herself it didn't matter. but it did. The weekend passed quietly. Charlie worked, Bella cleaned, caught up on assignments, and dutifully responded to her mom's emails with overly cheerful updates. A trip to the library left her disappointed. It was barely stocked, more like a storage room than a sanctuary. She added Seattle to her list of future escapes. Monday brought a cold comfort. Bella waved at vaguely familiar faces and found herself smiling more easily. Even Mike had settled into an effortless rhythm by her side. Then came the snow. White flakes spiraled from the sky like bits of cotton, coating the ground and swirling through the air. The students were ecstatic. Bella, not so much. "You, snow," she muttered. There went her good mood. Mike was baffled. "You've never seen snow?" "Sure I have," Bella said, "on TV." He laughed, just as a dripping snowball exploded against the back of his head. Bella didn't need to look. She had a hunch about Eric. Mike shared her suspicion, already scooping a handful of revenge from the lawn. She left him to it and headed indoors, muttering, "Once people start throwing wet stuff, I go inside." Everyone buzzed about the snow like it was a new pet. Bella kept her thoughts to herself. Snow was only rain in disguise, and it melted just as miserably in your socks. Bella trudged warily through the snow-flecked campus, a binder clutched like a shield as she and Jessica crossed the icy battlefield that had erupted outside Spanish class. Wet projectiles sailed through the air with reckless enthusiasm. Jessica giggled at Bella's caution, but something about her expression kept even her playful companion from tossing one her way. Inside the cafeteria, warmth greeted them with the hum of voices and the scent of fried food. Bella followed the familiar line without thinking, until her eyes made their habitual dart toward the table in the far corner. Her body froze before her mind caught up. All 5 of the Cullens were there. Jessica tugged her arm. "Bella, what do you want?" But Bella couldn't answer right away. Her stomach churned. Her ears burned. She hadn't done anything wrong. Yet, she felt exposed under the weight of memory, the venomous glare from just days ago. "I'll just get a soda today," she murmured, slipping to the end of the line. Jessica raised an eyebrow, but Bella stayed quiet, eyes lowered, hands trembling just slightly. When they reached the table, Bella moved like she was underwater, sinking into her seat and sipping her soda with aching slowness. Mike hovered, asking how she felt. Twice. She deflected each time, debating whether faking illness would be enough to get out of biology. She allowed herself one glance, just one. If Edward was scowling, she'd bolt. Eyes low, lashes raised, none of them were looking. She exhaled, then she looked again. They were laughing. Snow clung to Edward's bronze hair. Emmett shook his curls like a wet dog, earning mock protests from Alice and Rosalie. Jasper grinned. They looked impossibly like a normal group of siblings enjoying a snowy day.